So I am Catherine Kluber. I'm the Executive Director of the Future of Diplomacy Project. We are thrilled to host Special Representative Farah Pandith because the work at the Future of Diplomacy Project and the way that I have been working with Ambassador Burns over the last 9 months now to get the project off the ground, which we're officially launching next week. But as many of you will know, we've been very, very active since September already. The idea behind it was that we wanted to, in the Belfer Center, find a space to help redefine diplomacy in a modern context through the lens of leading practitioners, as we've been so lucky to have a number of wonderful guests who are engaging in very innovative means of engaging new populations. What is true for our guests today is non-state actors, actors that span across national borders, that sort of go across the general idea of what we used to think of as classical diplomacy. Nation to nation state, across a heavy wooden table, mostly male.
We could talk about that.
In a dark suit with a red tie. So these are the kind of things that are no longer, of course, correspondent to the realities in the world that we live in, and the challenges that State Departments and ministries of foreign affairs across the world are confronted with. So at the Future Diplomacy Project, our goal is to look comparatively at innovative ideas in terms of how different countries are engaging, be it different groups or different problems that are folding into the realm of foreign policy. That includes, of course, issues like environmental affairs, that includes immigration, that includes natural resources, et cetera, things that are no longer in their specific domestic arena, but are very much part of the international game. So I'm going to hand over to Monica Duffy-Toft, who is a professor at the Belfer Center. She's the director of the Initiative on Religion and International Affairs, and she will introduce our guest, and we're thrilled to have her. So thank you all, and thank you.
You're welcome. So welcome, everybody, and it's my pleasure. In fact, Farah and I know each other from long back, and we just lost touch with one another, both as term members in the Council on Foreign Relations, and I think it was 15 years ago.
Yeah,
oh my
scary,
God.
very scary.
Anyway, I'm getting older, but you're not. You look fabulous.
Please.
So, well, anyway, so I run the Initiative on Religion and International Affairs, and Farah, it was funny because when I got the email to moderate this discussion, I said, that's so funny. I'm fixing my syllabus for the spring. I teach a course on religion and global politics. And I was going to ask you to be a guest speaker, so I'm going to put you on the spot and say, would you consider an invitation to come back?
Just give me heads up. Yeah, exactly.
Understanding that you might have to cancel them because you're extraordinarily busy, as we can see from the most recent visit of Obama to Indonesia, that the idea of engaging different communities, not just Muslim communities, but Christian communities, and then, of course, Jewish communities, Sikh communities, Buddhist communities, globally, the relevance and importance of religion and religious actors, and the idea that they're not state to state. If any actor, institution is not contained within states, it is religious actors who are transnational and who are in many ways sort of the actors to sort of capitalize on our globalizing system and what's happening internationally today. So Farah, it turns out, is actually not as global as I thought you were. You're very much a local Massachusetts Bostonian. She got her degree from Smith College and then Tufts. She got her master's degrees from Tufts and has been very active in policy making, and now has this very important and prestigious position in the Obama administration, reporting directly to Secretary of State Hillary Clinton on the U.S. in terms of its relations with Muslim communities worldwide. And so today she's going to talk about a Muslim engagement with the U.S. in the 21st century. Talk for about 30 to 45 minutes.
I will talk less than that because I want to get a lot of questions.
And then we'll open it up to a discussion. And I think I heard you say that you're fine with this being on the record. Yeah. Okay, so it's on the record. And with that, I'll leave it to you, and then we'll just moderate and try and have a free-flowing conversation.
Great.
Welcome.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon. Is this one mine?
Yes.
Oh, I'm so excited. Thank you. First of all, I'm so happy to be back in Massachusetts. I grew up in Milton and in Braintree. And for those of you who take the Red Line, you've seen those names on the Red Line. But I don't get to Boston often, and so it's a delight to be at Harvard and have a chance to talk with students, which I really love doing because you are the future, and it's very important that you understand what's taking place. So here we go. Let me back up and talk to you about why we have a special representative to Muslim communities, where it came from, how the role is conceived, and what I do. And then I will hopefully get us into a place where we can talk very specifically about some of the things that I've seen on the ground, trends that I've seen, things that are taking place, and have a conversation with you for the bulk of the time. So I'm going to talk to you for about 15 or 20 minutes, not 30 minutes, because I think it's going to be more fun to get your Q&A. So as you guys know, I mean, really, truly unprecedented moment in time. When the president gave his inaugural address on the steps of the Capitol and reached out to one faith group, the faith group that he reached out to was Muslims, and he talked about wanting to start a new beginning. In Ankara, a couple of months later, the president talked about his desire to reinvigorate relationships, build partnerships on the ground based on mutual interest and mutual respect. But it was in Cairo in June of '09 where he gave his framework for engagement at the University of Cairo, and he was talking about ways in which we can engage with 1.6 billion Muslims around the world, using tools such as entrepreneurship, science, education, technology, and a lot of things in between, talking about the need to engage 1/4 of humanity, based on a paradigm that is beyond sort of the security paradigm, but in fact look at the human dimension of what's taking place on the ground in ways in which we, the United States, can be the convener and the facilitator and the intellectual partner with the ideas that we hear on the ground. It was a very important speech because it was able to build out his framework, the passion, the perspective, the unprecedented moment in a way that really took the world's attention. But it's not only about a speech. It's about what happens on the ground day in and day out in terms of the things that we have to do to build connectivity and build relationships around the world. 2 weeks after the Cairo speech, Secretary Clinton asked me to be the first ever special representative to Muslim communities. This is the first time in American history that we have such a position. The Office of the Special Representative is a place at the State Department where we sort of work with our embassies around the world on a wide range of things that have to do with Muslims, but very specifically, the Secretary asked me to focus on a people-to-people engagement level. Now, that's really important. Most of the time, government works in a different way. Government works from government to government. Decisions are made up here and they trickle down to the community level. What she's asked me to do is focus on what's happening at the grassroots, getting to know the communities, the localities, the differences, the nuances built upon the framework of the president's mutual respect and mutual interest and mutual responsibility. How do we think about what our embassies are doing as we engage around the world? So my job all day, every day, is to work on that people-to-people side. And I've been traveling almost nonstop since I was sworn in September of '09. I have been to 30 countries around the world. Muslim majority countries and Muslims that live as minorities, and that's very important too. The frame has changed. For many at the State Department for many years, and actually outside of the State Department too, when we thought about Muslims, we thought about the Middle East, and everything was defined by the Middle East. There are more Muslims that live outside the Middle East than in it. And increasingly, as we think about what's taking place in the world, things that are happening in different parts of the world are infecting and impacting the way we see reactions, the way we think about partnerships, the way we think about communication. And it's important for us, as we think about 21st century statecraft, to think about how we're connecting those ideas and we're thinking about those populations around the world. So this people-to-people approach, this diversity of method approach, and the way in which the lexicon, the frame, the commitment to how we connect has changed too. So this is it's a turning point in the way in which we think about relationship building around the world. And it's not just to do this so that they, quote unquote, like us, unquote. This effort is to build connectivity with 1/4 of humanity, to build on common interests, whether those interests are human rights, their literacy, their health, their science, their education, their technology, their entrepreneurship, that we're doing all that we can to connect voices who are working on these things and work on projects together. I'm really focused on your generation and the generation below you, the under age 30 crowd. Why? 1.6 billion Muslims on the planet. Most of those Muslims are under the age of 30. In most communities, it's over the age of over the percentage number of 62, so 60 and 70%, depending on where in the world we're talking about. That is a huge number. Think about that number. Think about all the incredible ideas of young people around the world who have not been tapped, that have not been connected, who have felt as though they have no way to partner with our government or, in fact, our industry and our ideas around the world. So we are trying to be, as I said earlier, that convener, that facilitator, that intellectual partner with the ideas. What I feel like I'm doing is talent scouting. I'm going around the world and finding the young people who are really amazing and really trying to do as much as I can to actually help that idea go forward. Whether it means that I connect the idea of the person in Nouakchott, Mauritania with the person in Lahore, Pakistan, or it's saying to the person that I meet in Stockholm, oh my gosh, this NGO that's doing this right here, there is such a need for you to explain what you're doing to that incredible group that I just met in Trinidad. Can I put you two in touch? That sounds really random to some people, like you're doing what? But that's Facebook. This is the Facebook generation. This is a generation that does that in a second. They connect on ideas, things of interest. We're trying to act as that facilitator. Speaking of Facebook, technology is unbelievably important to us. 5/6 of the world all have cell phones. Okay? They are connected. They are connecting. We're seeing the way in which governments are using 21st century statecraft. I know all of you have probably heard the Secretary of State speak about 21st century statecraft and the importance of technology. But when you're able to get millions of dollars to Haiti in 3 days through texting campaigns, and you're able to send ideas through Facebook pages that are actually getting to start movements around the world, and you're able to use Twitter to be able to bring out ideas that are happening on the ground. You guys heard what happened in Iran. You guys watched that. You also see those kinds of campaigns happening everywhere in the world. We are trying to actually be more transparent and more connected virally as well, which is why I'm on Facebook and Twitter, and I hope you guys join me and follow me. But I do that because I want to be able to give light to some of the ideas that I hear on the ground. And I expose people who are doing really incredible things. This generation change, is the generation that I'm focused on, because I believe that this is the generation that can make the difference in terms of relationships, that can make the difference in terms of partnerships, and the opportunity to affect change on the ground, because it's real people who can do that. We haven't had these kinds of conversations before. We haven't done as much as we can to go deep and go wide with communities on the ground through our embassies, and we're doing that now. We aren't just meeting with the typical people who are heads of organizations, pick your country, but we're actually going further in, and we're saying, who's the young blogger? Who's the young entrepreneur? Who's that young student that we heard about through so-and-so and so-and-so, and bringing them around a table and saying, share your ideas. How can we connect with you? That's a new way of doing diplomacy. That is a new way of actually thinking about the frame, and it's a new way of thinking about the goal that we're trying to reach. It's important for me to tell you that my job is not winning hearts and minds. If you think for 1 minute that I'm on some campaign around the world to make everybody like us, you're talking to the wrong person. That isn't my job. My job is to do as much as I can to make sure that with our embassies that we're getting to know this next generation, that we're finding commonalities, we're finding ways to open doors that have been shut, we're finding out ways to bring partnerships together, and we're finding, very importantly, ways in which we can actually be helpful in bringing the private sector, foundations, and others to an idea to give it power and bring it up. We're creating idea incubators around the world. We're transforming the narrative so that it is not an us and a them. And we're helping the voices that are more credible than a government transform that narrative as well, because they are getting into the real space and getting some lift in terms of what they're doing. As I think about opportunities going ahead, and I'm talking very optimistically and very strongly in terms of I do believe that this is an opportunity. I too understand that there are significant challenges that are out there as well. When we think about the need to do all of the things that I've been talking about, and I am working on that, I will say at the same time, equally important, the President has put front and center very key foreign policy things that he knows we need to do in order to be able to fill out our commitment to build relationships that are more trustworthy, that are working towards advancing humanity. In the Cairo speech, he talked about all of them. He talked about the closure of Gitmo. He talked about Iraq. He talked about Israel-Palestine. He talked about Pakistan, Afghanistan. He talked about some very serious issues that are challenges out there. At the same time, he also, very importantly, as I told you with his inaugural address, putting Muslims front and center on his second day of office, I think it was, the President named an envoy for Middle East peace, and he named a special representative to Afghanistan, Pakistan. We have a special representative for the closure of Guantanamo Bay. He has taken his strength as commander-in-chief and put it on the ground and said, look, these are things I want to get to the goal line on too. So it's not just we're doing only this side, we're also doing the very hard, very serious things that my colleagues are working on day in and day out at the State Department. And together, in parallel, I think we're looking forward and we're not looking backward. We're finding ways to advance causes that are very important to us, but also answering the mail on some very important foreign policy issues that we all would like to see resolved soon. This approach, I started by talking about the unprecedented moment in time. And this is, in fact, an unprecedented moment in time. When you have a commander-in-chief and you have a Secretary of State, they're absolutely committed to using everything that we can to build stronger communities and build stronger relationships with communities around the world. And I want to say one other thing. You know, when the President puts Muslim engagement front and center on day one, and he follows it up with a directive to his entire administration to say, please do as much as you can. It means it's not just the Department of State that's working on this. So you have the U.S. Trade and Development Agency working on economic pieces, and Commerce, and USAID, and Department of Education, and on, who are also in their different lanes working on these issues as well, which is why you see, for example, science envoys traveling around the world, which is why you see us working on bilateral relationships on a government-to-government level in different ways, which is why you see on an organizational level a commitment to the Organization of Islamic Conference, and we have an envoy for the OIC. These are things that we're all doing in parallel, all to get us to a place where we have more respectful, more robust, and more cohesive engagement with a very important demographic around the world. So that's what my job is. That is what I've been doing for the last year. This is what our effort is on the ground. I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about what I've seen. I said I've traveled to 30 countries around the world, and I want to just underscore again how important that is, not to brag about how many countries I've gone to, but rather to demonstrate that we have to be respectful of the fact that a Muslim living in Stockholm is as Muslim as a Muslim living in Sana'a. That we are not creating this hierarchy of what's more important. That we understand, importantly, the different cultures that impact the communities that we're talking about. That we're giving respect to that piece of it as well. We are not creating a monolith, that all things Muslim are the same. The President said something very important in Cairo, and I don't know if all of you caught it. He stopped using the term the Muslim world. He used Muslim communities around the world. And that is really important too. Because if you believe that all things Muslim are one thing, they all look like that, they all feel like that, they all taste like that, you are disrespecting the diversity of people, cultures, and ethnicities that impact how Muslims live. And what we're trying to do is get our embassy in New Zealand, and our embassy in India, and our embassy in Suriname, and our embassy in Pakistan to be doing more people-to-people engagement, but respectfully within the cultures, within the history, within the environments that they're living in. I also want to say that as we think about sort of the lexicon piece, this us and them paradigm that was set up by Huntington in '93 when I was in graduate school, you guys have all read The Clash of Civilizations, I'm sure. It's a narrative that Al-Qaeda would also have you believe, that there is a world in which non-Muslims live, and then there's a world in which all Muslims are exactly the same and they breathe the same way and they're supposed to do the same thing. We've broken that down. So we are not looking looking at that paradigm. It doesn't exist. There's no West versus Islam. There's no America versus Islam. The president has been unbelievably clear and forthright about that. But on the ground, we have to demonstrate that as well. So the frame with which we're doing things has changed. When I talk with young people around the world, we talk about a wide range of things, obviously. I hear a lot about foreign policy. I get a lot of questions about where we are in the peace process, or why we haven't done more in Afghanistan or Pakistan, or whatever the issue is. But I also get the question about what's happening to their peer group around the world. And that's really important for you to understand. Muslims are not, in my experience in talking, there's so many differences around the world, even within a country. You know, countries are not all the same either. You know, Boston is not a New Orleans. We understand all of that, but there's one data point that has been consistent no matter where in the world I've gone. And the generation under the age of 30 is having a very hard time navigating their identity. What does it mean to be Muslim and modern? What's the difference between culture and religion? And this is a generation that every single day since September 12th, online and offline, has seen the name Islam or Muslims on the front page. And that has shaped and changed the way they've thought about things. The global conversation obviously has changed, but it also impacts identity. So you're seeing things in this generation that no one has ever seen before, and it's striking. It is unbelievably striking to see that change in identity and that complexity and that difficulty of navigation. One of the things that I thought was so interesting when I read the information about the Christmas Day bomber, a lot was being said about his high net worth, family net worth. A lot was being said about his education. A lot was being said about the fact that he studied in Europe. Nobody picked up this fact, and I thought it was really weird. He asked a website, why does my family not eat halal meat? Why did he ask a website? Why didn't he ask his mom or his dad or his cousin or his brother or his sister? Why did he go to an external source to ask a really basic question that a normal kid would just normally ask? There is a movement. People are asking questions about identity and confusion to external sources. And I'm using that as a data point. I can give you many, many others of young kids who have talked about this. But that was a very public thing. I thought I would just draw it out. But it's this piece that is most challenging for us. If we are not able to connect young people to other young people who are doing amazing things, if we do not pay attention to the identity navigation, the loudest voices will reign. And those are the voices that will actually impact how a young person thinks about themselves. If we say all things Muslim are one thing, and we don't talk about the diversity, we don't talk about the challenges that different Muslim communities are dealing with, culture versus religion, you're not helping a grand number of people around the world think about these issues in a constructive way. And frankly, the answers for many are online in ways that we really rather not see them. What we would like to see is the young people that I'm meeting around the world take the reins of the conversation. Take the reins of how we frame Islam and Muslims. And as U.S. government officials, what we want to do is build partnerships so that we're working on things such as education and exchanges and technology and entrepreneurship, so that we're working together in partnership to do constructive things. We're not always setting things up as a combative situation. So things for me in the last year have demonstrated that, one, we have potential that we need to actually leverage, and that is the young generation in new ways and in dynamic ways. I've also seen a very troubling trend with regard to this identity navigation, which I think is unbelievably serious and very, very important. And I've also seen the potential of technology being able to connect great ideas around the world with young people. So when we are able to see the increase of folks using social networking tools and also going to places to learn about issues that they don't feel comfortable about talking about, there is going to be more and more value in bringing out the voices that have been able to speak about it in ways that they don't always see. And that's very important as well. So with that, I'm going to pause, and I think what I'd love to do is just have a conversation with you, and let's get into some of these issues, or if you'd like to also ask other things, we are welcome to do that as well. So, yeah, you're welcome.
So Farah, I was just wondering if you can give it just an example of some of these incubations. So you mentioned sort of hooking up an NGO in, let's say, Sweden or Norway, in the Nordic countries, with another, maybe somebody who's trying to do service delivery in another part. And then you also mentioned about narratives. Can you give an example about how the narratives have shifted? Because the one that you gave about Obama shifting from the Muslim world or the Islamic civilization or whatever to Muslim communities, it is a very important shift to the plural and recognizing that it's plural. So do you have any other examples of that where the narratives have shifted as well, and where you feel it's actually had some real policy purchase as a result?
So in terms of the connectivity, the first part of your question, in terms of incubation of ideas, that's happening all the time in real time. I mean, I meet hundreds of people in a month that have great ideas that we are compiling, and we're saying, because when I hear, I mean, look, you hear somebody talk about, well, if we only had a this, for them to be, even though, and I know it's a different language, it's a different culture, but the utility of going through the experience of how did you set up that hotline in the UK where young kids are calling in to say, I'm concerned, I think this is happening in my family, I don't have anywhere to go, which is, one could argue, a human thing. It's not just a Muslim thing, but it's a human thing, but there's a context and a veil around it that is really, very, very delicate because of the cultural norms. To be able to say to that person, well, even though you're in Nigeria, let me put you in touch with that person in London, because you can talk about how they set it up, what the added value was, what you're seeing on the ground. That NGO in Sweden that talks about issues of identity and also leadership, trying to get young people off the ground, has value in other parts of the world, because a lot of young kids have talked about the need to be able to get that jump start, to understand what it means to be a leader. We're American here, right? We don't wait for government to tell us it's okay. We go out there and do it. In many parts of the world, many of these young people have good ideas, or they know how to solve something, but they are waiting for the blessing of their government, or they're waiting for somebody to say it's okay. They're not self-starters. They're not going to go out there. So it's often easier for me to be able to say, can I give you the email address of this person? Can I make that email introduction for you? Or can you, and have them begin to have that conversation independently and quietly, and having it grow. I think the value for the U.S. government is, as I said, being that convener and that facilitator, and walking away, not getting in it, but walking away. So you're seeing a lot of that kind of idea incubation on the ground, and then you're seeing something more formal as well. On the more formal side, we've launched this thing called Generation Change. We started it by basically saying, look, what we're trying to do around the world is highlight these young people under the age of 30 who are the talent, who have really great ideas. The Secretary had her iftar in September of this past year, and what we wanted to do is mirror the kind of approach we want to take overseas here, so that people could sort of see what that is. And so we handpicked 75 amazing American Muslims who are working on incredible projects for humanity. They're not just Muslim things. Some of them are, but some of them are just really cool things that you want to do, and we connected them together. We were able to bring them. Now, all we did was say, come on, let's get together and construct a way in which, like this, they could talk to each other and share ideas, but then they created a network. And that network is now saying, okay, they're on Facebook, right? What are we going to do together with this momentum? How do we connect generation changes around the world? That is a more formal role that we played in building it. But I think, when I said this is not, I talked about the not being winning hearts and minds. I also don't want this to be some sort of effort that the American is coming in on the white horse with a flag saying, I'm going to be able to bring this to you. What we're just doing is doing this connection piece. And that's really, really important, because it means that you're giving organically the strength to people to be able to do things. All we're doing is making that happen. The issue of narratives is one of the most important issues of our day, frankly. The way in which we shape everything, and it is not just the lexicon, and by the way, lexicon is unbelievably important, and I beg you not to use the terminology Muslim world, but it's the premise that goes with it. What do we mean when we talk about the we. What do we mean about when we talk about how we work on projects together? When we are looking at the kinds of effort that we see globally and how things are constructed, it is often an us and a them in the media, and how it's, I was asked on NPR actually about 2 weeks ago, and I don't think they appreciated my answer, but somebody asked the question, how can Americans learn more about Islam and Muslims? And I said, if you'll permit me, I think what you asked is how can Americans who are not Muslim learn more about? And I didn't mean to be obnoxious. I just mean, think about what you say when you say it. There are millions of Americans who are Muslims in this country. The way in which we give respect is the way in which you speak and talk about things. And I think it's really important that we stop washing things with big brushes, so that, because it adds into the narrative of a craziness that's going around the world. And I've never seen this kind of conversation in which people are so quick to define something without sort of thinking about what it is that they're saying. I know that that caller didn't mean anything by it. She was asking an earnest question. She wants to do more. She wants to learn more about Islam. But the premise that she started from was a little bit faulty in my mind. So you're seeing a president talk a little bit differently. We're also seeing a lot in terms of the narratives out there. When you think about diplomacy and policy and things that are shaped, you know very well how long it takes to get from the rhetoric to things on the ground actually shaping out differently. I will say to you, it's been amazing to me in 2 years to see how much we've done on the ground, in which we are talking about, and it's not just calling it Muslim communities around the world, but really getting our folks in our embassies to understand that it isn't, this is not a problem. This is an opportunity, and how are we thinking about things, and what is our role here? So on the diplomatic front, the kinds of partnerships and the kind of dialogue that we're building is changing as well.
Great.
Yeah.
So we'll open up the floor. If you could introduce yourself, say which program you're in, school, that would be really helpful. So I'm going to start here, and we'll just go around.
Hi, I'm Donnie. I'm from the MPA ID. ID is International Development here at the Kennedy School. I have two quick questions. First of all, thank you for this very insightful opportunity to have this discussion. In terms of policy, as you said, this is a very organic approach of focusing on people-to-people interaction, and I'm just wondering how do you measure this within a short time frame of what are specific benchmarks that are probably measurable? The second thing concerning specifically about Indonesia, President Obama just had a visit yesterday to the country, and I would like to hear from you, how do the United States or this administration position Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim democracy in the world, in the context of international relation? How do you see the trends within the Muslim communities in Indonesia? Is there? I would think that since 9/11 there has been a stronger anti-American sentiment within the country. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Two great questions. Thank you. First one, how to measure success, benchmarks. Critical question, and everybody asks it, and people want a formula because I think people think that they'll feel better if they know, okay, we got there, it's great. This is a long-term effort of building relationships, and it starts with trust. You can't build a relationship if you don't have trust. Well, you can't have trust if you haven't started talking. You can't start talk if there. I mean, you know that. Yeah. So we are beginning a conversation with a new frame, with a new way of doing things. It is not just defined by one thing or another. It's really looking. You heard me talk about all these things, and I think that we have the capacity to actually engage in absolutely new ways, and we put our money where our mouth is. I mean, we're doing a lot with education and science and technology and entrepreneurship, and I can get into all of those different things if you wish. But the measurement for me, as I think about what we have to do, is threefold. The first is very bureaucratic. Okay, have I been able to socialize this approach around the world, which is unbelievably important? If it's only happening in Washington, if I'm only talking in front of a camera and telling you that we're doing this, and it's not happening on the ground with our embassy in whatever country, I haven't really done very much, have I? Part of the reason I'm spending so much time on the ground is so that I'm working with the country team, so that we're understanding what we need to do. When I say, I mean the next generation, they know what I mean by that. That it's not just the same old, same old. Many times we have been pushing hard on to open up new connections to the embassy that never had before. People who didn't want to ever have anything to do with the U.S. Embassy are coming in and getting to know each other. I remember going to a country and I said, I really want to meet all the bloggers. Who are the young bloggers? Embassy folks said, we have no bloggers here. I'm like, yeah, you do. Let's go find them. I mean, it went this back and forth. Oh, guess what? We found a bunch of really cool bloggers, and guess what, too? So many of them hadn't met each other before. And they're like, oh my gosh, we never have been... So now they've been connected, working on issues that they think are really important. I'm not saying I saved the world, but it's important to think about the importance of that connectivity, the importance of making sure our embassies are actually bought into the effort. They know how to do it on the ground. So that's first. Secondly, are we seeding as many things as we can in this moment of time that have the potential to blossom? Not everything is going to blossom. Not everything that I do is going to turn into a beautiful forest. But if I can't say that we tried our hardest to plant seeds on innovation and creative ideas, then I haven't done my job. So we are trying to do that. That is a measurement of success. How many things have you tried and gone out there and found young people who are doing incredible things? And finally, have we been, on the second point, it's also that network, building that network of like-minded thinkers around the world. And I'm doing that in a wide variety of ways, but that's very, very important. Because that makes it sustainable, and that makes it organic, and that makes it that means that the U.S. government doesn't have to watch it all day, every day, but it's happening because we've been able to build that capacity, and it's going forward. The final thing is the issue of narrative. Have we been able to move away from the us and the them? Have we been able to inject into the global conversation some sanity when it comes to respect? How are we talking about 1/4 of humanity, and how are we asking our friends and our colleagues to think about that on the ground, no matter what they're doing? But this is not a one-way road. By talking about the issue of narrative, it isn't just what is America doing or how is media doing something, it's everybody. The mutual respect part of what the President said in Cairo is so important. It's Muslims and non-Muslims working together to be respectful of each other. And that is critically important. One of the things that I'm doing, and will be increasingly doing in 2011, is working hand in hand with our envoy for combating anti-Semitism, Hannah Rosenthal. Hannah and I, this past year, have done some collaborations together, but it's really important. Hate is hate. You know, what are we doing to change that dynamic? So those are three concrete things. It's not the horse blanket that people expect with our progress on a military campaign. It can't be. This is a completely different animal. And it's a long-term thing. In the course of the next 2 decades, we will be watching how this generation is contributing to our planet, how our country is building relationships with them, and we're getting to know them in a time of non-crisis, not in a time of crisis. So will that make an impact in the way in which we have built our relationships? It's not a question of a Pew poll or a Gallup poll about how popular is America. It's about how we invested in this long-term effort to make change.